Welcome back to the show, Matushka. It's wonderful to have you a third time. We've talked about,
Thank you.
what have we talked about? Toys. We've talked about craft.
Mhm.
And so today we're talking about something a little more serious, which is miscarriage. And I thought maybe you could start by explaining how you got to creating a website about miscarriage.
I had 5 children, and when I was expecting the 6th one, which was a few years after the 5th one, we were excited. Um, what happened was I everything was fine. I didn't suspect any problems. I'd never had any problems. And then I went in for a routine exam and they couldn't find a heartbeat, but then they were like, well, I mean, it's early, baby's hide, go in for an ultrasound. And I went in for an ultrasound and there was no heartbeat. And the baby had died, measuring 12 weeks, 5 days, so just about 13 weeks. And I found out um, 2 days after I had made an announcement on my blog saying, oh, we're having baby number 6. And I had never really subscribed to the, oh, you should wait until after the first semester to announce just in case. I never really subscribed to that. I wasn't worried about having a miscarriage. I mean, I'd had 5 children, no complications. Um, I mean, I didn't think it could happen to me. I mean, I think that's what everybody thinks,
Mm-hmm.
it's not, it happens to other people. You certainly want to think that. So all of a sudden it happened to me. And now I was navigating something that it's not that I didn't know anything about it because my background, I'm a nurse and I'd worked at GYN oncology, and we took care of uh, the lost mothers on our floor so they didn't have to stay on the postpartum floor with all the baby things. And so we cared for them. And so I had experience caring for mothers who lost their babies. And I had experience with labor and delivery of full-term babies in hospitals. But I didn't have any practical experience in miscarriage, and I didn't know what to expect. And they immediately assumed I was going to have a DNC, and the idea was abhorrent to me. I'd taken care of the baby this far, and I was going to keep taking care of him or her. And so I had a blog. I had an Orthodox mommy blog, and I sent out a message. I said, this is what's happened. And if any of you have had a miscarriage, had that experience, especially not one that was really early, but I was right on the edge between the first and second trimester. Um, you don't have to comment here, but could you message me? Could you email me and please help me know what to expect? What was your experience? What do you recommend? And many women did, at least one of which had been pregnant and miscarried, and nobody ever knew. She never told her family or anything. So I was the first person she ever told, in fact. And I didn't tell anyone, did not reveal her. But they were very helpful in knowing what to expect. And so I'd gone to, and this was a new doctor because I didn't have an OB yet. And so I had gone to this new doctor and he was very condescending and assumed that I'd be having a DNC. And I said, no, I'm going to deliver this baby on my own. And he basically told me I was crazy. And we actually had to make an appointment for a DNC basically before I could leave the office. I mean, I felt kind of like I was held hostage. And um, I went home and prayed really, really hard. Said, God, please, please let me deliver this baby on my own. And I spent the intervening time uh, getting everything ready for essentially with a home birth. And the busy part helped a lot because it gave me something to do, which
Mm.
as you can imagine,
Yeah.
having something practical to do was really, really helpful. And as it turned out, a few days later, uh, I went into labor and delivered him at home. I didn't have any complications. His full story is on the website. And I tried to go into it with, I don't want to have any regrets later. let me think of everything I can think of now because I'm not going to get to do this again. I don't have any second chances here. The sad thing is, it turned out I had second, third, and fourth chances, but I didn't know that. Still, I want to make sure I didn't have any regrets. So I had taken everybody's advice. I had prepared a small casket. I had, again, this entire story is on the website. But afterward, and after he was buried, I thought about all of the support I've been given and all the information and the fact that I was able to deliver him on my own. And I was able to do it safely. And I thought, I had looked up information online and there wasn't any. Um, I didn't know what he would look like. And if you look up pictures of 13-week baby, you're going to see pictures you don't want to see. Most of the pictures are not pictures you want to see. Now, that may be a little different now, but this was 14 years ago. Um, and there were not stories about, okay, so how do you actually take care of the body? How do you this? How do you, there just wasn't any of that. And I thought, maybe I need to make a website and put all of that information in there so that somebody else has help because I had help. I had the nursing background. I had the knowledge from having delivered 5 babies. I had all of the help people given me, and it felt really unfair that somebody else wouldn't have that. So that's how I actually created Lost Innocence, and I named it Lost Innocent. I named the baby Innocent because I found out that we had lost him on the Feast of Saint Innocent in March, and he was actually due on the other Feast of Saint Innocent in October.
Wow.
So that's how my husband actually was reluctant to name him because they said, well, we're not going to know if it's a boy or girl. And I said, actually, we very well may know after he's born. There's a good chance because we're far enough along, we might know. And it turned out it was a boy. But um, so we settled on the name Innocent, and I named it Lost Innocence because all of the babies we lose are innocent, and we talk about losing them. Now they're not lost theologically, but
Mhm.
also it represented a loss of innocence, because I thought, oh, it can't happen to me, and then it did, and you
Right.
can't go back. I mean, once that wall's broken, you never see pregnancy the same way again, and so it's a loss of innocence. So that's how I named it that. And then 6 months later, I was pregnant again, and then I lost him at the exact same time. Um, it was 13 weeks, right on the dot. And I don't know why we lost either one of them. I mean, probably the most likely reason is a chromosomal abnormality. There's nothing visible. I didn't feel like it was helpful to have any testing done because if I had testing done, I wouldn't have a body left to bury. So
Right.
this because they're so tiny. I decided that was not important. And eventually, it took a few years, but I finally came around to understanding, if God wants me to know why, he'll tell me why. If it's not important for my salvation to know why, then I'm not going to know. And I accepted that. But it took a few years. I mean, I was
Sure.
not a happy camper about that. Why, so that I can prevent it. It doesn't work that way. So, it, it, that was in 2011. After that, I had secondary infertility. Surprise! So I've gotten to experience that too. We don't know why, so kept trying and no baby. In 2013, we had our sixth living baby, and then the next year, I miscarried twice more. Um, Again, we don't know why. We don't know why. At 11 weeks and then at 6 weeks. Um, and then we wound up 2 years later having one more living baby. So I've had four miscarriages, and as eh, the as my experiences um, increased, including one of them was born in a hospital, so I had an induction. So every time something like that, I was able to add that experience and add that aspect, of miscarriage care, whatever, to the website to expand it. Um, and then also, I asked people, hey, if you would like to share pictures of your babies that you took, um, then we can honor them here. And that helps people know if they're like, what does a 9-week baby look like? Then they can see a 9-week baby, in the hand of his mother, and things like that, which is a whole lot better than, again, what you're going to get if you Google, which I don't recommend, strongly don't recommend. So over time, I started the website, but over time, other people helped build it because they submitted their own stories. Like, this is what happened to me. I had twins. I had this. I did this. Um, and so I divided the website up into trimesters. So you can look at the first trimester, second trimester, third trimester, and you have photographs of babies at most weeks. There are fewer as you get farther into the third trimester, simply because it's not as focused on stillbirth.
Mhm.
And that's just how it is. But all the stories are organized chronologically, so are the pictures. And again, it's divided up into segments by trimester. And then there are a lot of other topics about, you know, what do I do? There are quite a number of topics covered on the website, but that's how it started. So,
Well, first of all, thank you for sharing your story because I know that's not easy, but your compassion and your knowledge and your experience just shines through in the website in a really incredible way. I was really, really impressed. I know it's kind of an
thank you.
older format of the blog spot, right? But it's
Well, no,
still
it's on WordPress now.
oh,
It
it's on
used to be
WordPress.
on,
Okay.
yeah, it used to, I started it. That was back in the blogger days, yeah.
Yeah.
But
But I think I
I
told you I was reading it the other day and just, weeping because you have a real gift for explaining these things in a very non-judgmental way and in a very clear and affirming way. And it was just, you know, we always let our guests plug their websites and things, but this I wanted to make sure we did it up front to really drive home to people how beautiful this website is when you get into it. And it's really for everyone. It's not just for women who are experiencing or have experienced miscarriage, but also fathers and husbands and people that want to support their friends. Like it's really for everybody. I think you're going to know someone who has a miscarriage, right?
right,
It's,
yeah, you do.
you do.
You may not know that but you know somebody who has. Yeah,
And
they
it's,
just may
you were
not have said
talking,
anything.
yeah, you were talking like about the grief and the loneliness, especially with the loss of innocent. And it reminded me a lot of when I lost my mother. It's like when it happens to you, you lose your innocence in that way. It's like, oh, this is what it's like to lose a mother. When
Right.
people told me they were losing their mother to cancer or something, I was empathetic, but it was in a
Yeah.
detached sort of way. And now that you hear
Yeah.
someone
Once you know,
yeah, it changes you
yeah.
and
It
you're more
does.
compassionate. And so I think your compassion on this subject, I just wanted to say that really shines through on the website. And if you go and read it, take some tissues because the stories are heartbreaking and beautiful. And yeah, it's quite remarkable, really. So I thought maybe we could just kind of walk through the different stages and talk about the different issues as things come up. So, what are some of the first signs, maybe, that something has gone wrong with a pregnancy?
Well, th this kind of touches on there are really two different types of miscarriages primarily. One, and a miscarriage, a spontaneous miscarriage, you can either have one that the first sign is you start bleeding. And what has usually happened is the baby died some time ago. I mean, it may have been 2 days ago, it may have been 2 weeks ago. And you're not going to know unless you compare measured dates of an ultrasound, like if you go in to be checked, with where you're supposed to be. And like, oh, this is 2 weeks behind. Like, well, the baby died 2 weeks ago. That's what happened. Now, sometimes there's growth retardation, but usually in the early stages, you can just say, well, the age and the size correlate really, really closely. Um, the second kind is usually you don't know anything's wrong. You go in for a checkup and wait, the baby's died. And that is horribly shocking because you didn't have any warning. Now, sometimes you can look back and say, oh, I know, they said the baby died about a week ago. And you're like, you know what? My nausea would just started disappearing. I started getting more energy. And I actually did, in retrospect, I realized that because I found out Innocent had died about a week after he died. Um, and I look back and thought, you know what? I got my energy back. I stopped feeling sick, but I thought it was because I was coming out of the first trimester.
Right.
And it kind of matched previous pregnancies. So it didn't tip me off. But in retrospect, and I actually had in subsequent healthy pregnancies going to the doctor in an absolute panic because I was suddenly feeling well and thinking that that meant the baby died. And I will say that hopefully, if that happens to you, you have a very compassionate doctor, nurse, ultrasonographer who understands you are genuinely fearful that the worst thing in the world has happened to you all over again. And you're not a bother, and yes, come in and be checked. And I would hope that most doctors would be. I have heard, some are not. It's a good sign to get another doctor, if they treat you like you're an annoyance and you're just worried. In any event, so signs, a lot of times there just aren't any. The first sign somebody might notice is spotting, but that can also be normal in a regular pregnancy. So it's it's so non-specific. Um, if you were worried that that's happening, call your doctor and go in and get checked. They can do an ultrasound. They can check for HCG levels and make sure that they're rising appropriately. Um, and if nothing else, it's reassurance. But it's better than just sitting around and just worrying yourself sick. So in terms of, what signs there are, there's not much. And usually it takes people by surprise, um, which is awful. But there's no prep, there's really no good way to brace yourself, to be ready for it. I mean, it took me completely by surprise. Um, and I don't know what to say. I mean, it's usually the first thing you think about when you're having a miscarriage is you've been told that you're having a miscarriage. And suddenly it's just your world crashes down. It's hard to kind of hear anything else they say after that. Um, so
I've never
yeah, that's
miscarried. I thought I was with my first one, but we did lose a child in my family, my sister's firstborn, when he was 5 years old. And it was in a very traumatic way. And I remember, I'll never forget getting the phone call.
yeah,
And
yeah, you
it's
never.
exactly what you just described. Like your whole world crashes, you're in shock, you can't think clearly, it's a horrible moment. It's like one of the most
It's
horrible
horrible.
moments of
And
my
you're
life.
expected to make decisions,
Right.
you know. And I will go ahead and take this opportunity to say that don't make any decisions at that point. Um, don't schedule procedures. Don't just go home and process because there's no emergency. If you're bleeding heavily or something like that, yes, that does, you kind of have to just fly with the moment. There's not much you can do with that. But most of the time, that's not the case. Most of the time, you're fine. And they've done an ultrasound and they're telling you that there's no heartbeat. And they're like, okay, so we need to get you in for a DNC. Don't schedule it. I'm not telling you not to have one, but just don't go home, go home, call your family, call your priest, cry, scream,
Right.
just process. It's not an emergency. This is not, miscarriage is not an emergency,
That's good to
so
know because I would have assumed the farther along the child was that it would be an emergency. And
it's
as
an
we were chatting
emergency,
before,
right? It's an emergency if you are running a fever, if you are in pain, like not a little achy, but like
mhm,
pain. Um, If you have foul smelling discharge, these are all signs of like a uterine infection. If you're throwing up and not just nausea, not just pregnancy, but like you
mhm.
cannot keep anything down, this is worse than usual. You know, things have gotten worse. Um, or you're bleeding very heavily. I may have already mentioned that. Those are, um, if not emergencies, those are emergent. That's an acute situation. And in that case, you have to do whatever you need to do. And usually in that case, you need to be in the hospital, you need a DNC, you need antibiotics. That's just, you know, but most of the time you would never know. And most people don't know. They just go happily into the doctor's office and they're like, "Oh, we can't really find the heartbeat, but you know what? Just give us a couple of minutes and when the ultrasound is free, we'll just do one real quick and chase him down." And then they go and the room goes quiet and the doctor comes in and says, "I'm sorry." And so that's usually what you have. And that's not an emergency because most of the time when you find out, you lost the baby sometimes like a few weeks ago. And
Wow.
you can go weeks as long as you didn't have the things that I mentioned, which I was kind of going to get into this later, but I'll just go ahead and just so that we emphasize this fever, um, pain, severe, like abdominal pain, severe abdominal pain, heavy bleeding, like period, at least period or more, anything like that, um, foul smelling or just yucky drain, discharge.
Mhm.
Um, or nausea and vomiting, can't keep anything down. You need to go be seen. You need to go to the emergency room. You need to be admitted. Start they'll take care of you once you get to the hospital. But if you're in the doctor's office and you're doing any of this, they're going to send you straight to the hospital. If you're at home, you need to go to the ER. Call your OB, whatever, so they know you're
Mhm.
coming, but go. Because yes, but most of the time, that's not the case. And it's just not an emergency. And go home and think about it, because they're going to try to get you to make this decision right there. And you're still reeling. You still haven't even wrapped your brain around what's just happened here. You don't even know. Your husband may not be with you.
Mhm.
You may have gone to the
Right.
doctor alone because there's nothing wrong. Why? It's just a regular
Right.
checkup, you know? And you're there. Now you got to drive yourself home. Speaking of which, it's worth getting a ride home,
Mm.
you know?
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. You have to remember you have to take care of yourself, you know? Just you're not second stage, Um, yeah, anyway, we'll get into that later too, but
Yeah. So
yeah.
then what would a woman kind of expect to see? And this is all, we'll say this in the beginning, but this is all for educational purposes. We're not giving medical or spiritual advice today, but you need to seek out your doctor, your priest for things. But
Yeah.
this is all for
Right.
just
And I
educational
had a
purposes
doctor
here.
consult an OBGYN worked with me on the website, by the way. So,
Oh, wonderful.
yeah, and I got that on there. But I also have the caveat I'm not a doctor.
Hmm.
This is not medical advice, and just right. Yeah. Always take care of yourself, So I'm
So
sorry,
what?
what was the question?
So what would a woman expect to happen next?
um, well, again, hopefully you've said, you know what, I will call you back tomorrow or whatever, and
Hmm.
I'm going to go home now. So what to happen next? Well, you have to think about somehow or another, the baby's still inside. And this is called a missed miscarriage, by the way, where the baby's dying, your body hasn't figured it out yet. Um, it will. I mean, on rare occasions, it won't. And I was mentioning to you earlier, there's a woman who went, and I'm trying to remember, it was at least 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I don't think it was 6. It's still safe, but you're really into kind of nail biting territory, when you get past 5 weeks after you found out after the baby has died. But as long as you don't have an infection and you're physically checked out and everything's fine, you're okay to wait. So again, once the baby has died, the baby has to come out one way or another. Um, there are only two ways to do that. You can either deliver the baby as you would a full term living baby, or you can have a DNC. Um, both of those have pros and cons. And one of the things I do on the website, because we're not going to go through all the details of
Hmm.
this, but one thing I do on the website is list all of the different management of miscarriage, medical and surgical, because you can also be induced. You can wait to go into labor naturally, or you can, depending on how many weeks you are. And again, I'm not going to go into all the details of that,
And this could
but
be
there
at home or in the hospital, correct?
that's right. And
Yeah, so
again,
there's a
depending
lot
on
of
how many
variation.
weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, this depending on how many weeks you are, depending on what else is going on. If it's twins, I mean,
Mhm.
God forbid, but it happens. And so there I've got pros and cons listed for each thing because the important thing is one thing a lot of women don't get is what I would consider informed consent is they're asked to make a decision, but they're not informed. So there's like, oh, you're gonna have a DNC. Well, it comes with risks, and it may
Right.
come down to it, and you don't have any choice but to accept those risks because that's just where you are. it's kind of nice to know what those risks are.
Hmm.
There are also risks to medical induction, whether in the hospital, and I
Hmm.
had a medical induction in the hospital. There are risks to just waiting. So there's risks for everything, but that's why I laid it all out in almost chart form so that you could look at it and be informed and make a decision that was best for you. Um, there are pros and cons for each one. Now, I'm a proponent of waiting until your body goes into labor naturally because as long as you don't have an infection, as long
Hmm.
as you don't develop a problem, that's actually the lowest risk. That's the lowest physical risk for your body is to do it naturally. Um, but it's difficult because
Yeah.
you're walking around pregnant. You're still pregnant. Oh, when's the baby due? You go to the store. You may it be
Hmm.
too early, you're not showing, but you've also told people at work,
Hmm.
people at church, and then you got to tell them over and you got to go through it over and over and over. It can be really, really hard. So this is why you don't make a split second decision. This is why you go home and you think about it because there's kind of a lot writing on it, and I don't mean eternally. I just mean it's a lot, and so you have to decide, well, which path is best for me, and that may change. You may get to a certain point and say, I can't do this anymore. I'm just going to go this way, and so you know, again,
Yeah.
that's why I have all of the, and when I say details, I mean details. That's why I've got
Yeah.
all the
Yeah. It
details
is.
laid out. Yeah,
Yeah, and probably taking your time with these decisions and, like you said, going home and thinking about it will probably lead to less regret later on, I would think.
yeah,
Whenever I've rushed into serious
yes,
decisions like this, in retrospect, it's like, oh, I wish I had not had done that. So,
right, yeah,
yeah, you
yeah.
just
You
need
won't
to,
regret taking your time.
right.
Because you'll think, well, I wish things had gone differently, but I did sit down and think about it, and that was the
Hmm.
best decision I had based on the situation at hand. And that will come with much less regret.
Yeah.
You're always going to have some sort of regret. I mean, but I did try to go into it the first time. I did try to go into it saying, I'm going to try not to have any regrets. Let me think about this from the perspective of after. What would I wish I had done?
Hmm.
And that helped immensely. And just not rushing. And doctors will tend to rush because, I mean, I got to be honest, it's really easy to just schedule the DNC. And then they bring you in for a follow-up appointment and you're done, you know? And it sounds cold and callous. And some of them are cold and callous. I mean, that's the reality. But it's also what they're used to. And most of them wouldn't even know how to advise you to go about waiting to miscarry at home, which is something that actually, for instance, a midwife may have much more experience and be much more able to help with. I never actually had one. I'm just saying that that's
Hmm.
consistent with what they tend to do. So,
Okay. Um, so somehow the baby is born, or, the baby comes out of the mom's womb. What
right.
happens then? And again, I know we're
Um,
talking about different situations, but
sure, sure. Um, and this is another reason why you wait, so that you've had time to make preparations, because
hmm.
depending on how far along you are, there are different rules. I advise burying the baby. This is what we do for everybody else. It's not so that you have a grave to visit later. That's not primarily why you may move across the country, but we treat, you know, we treat all humans with dignity and respect, even in death, which is why, for instance, we have laws against abuse of a corpse, and those are secular laws. So the church, even more so, would have us, treat this is the temple that held our soul, and the body of the baby may be really tiny, but that's still held an entire human soul that's no smaller than any other soul. And that soul has gone to be with God. But, you think about it, you carry the baby and you try to eat right, you take your vitamins and you try to do the best you can, to whatever ability you had. And that doesn't stop just because the baby died, because the baby's still there. And so, which is one reason why it's very healing to be able to actually deliver the baby intact so that you can actually see the baby. Because, for one thing, it makes it real. This helps with grief. You have a feeling of completion. We conceived the baby, I went through the pregnancy, and I've delivered the baby. Yes, it didn't happen the way I wanted. But the culmination of that is, and then we buried the baby, because that's what you do with everybody else. You don't just leave your grandma in a landfill. I mean, for instance, you wouldn't, flush a 2-year old. I mean, that sounds awful, but I mean, that's what
Right.
people are advised to do. And that's just,
Hmm.
you will regret that. People have,
Yeah.
I can't tell you the number of emails and messages I've had since I started the website. I don't know how many. I mean, I don't know, but so many of them are, I really, really regret this, and that is something spiritually you have to come to terms with. It's like you did the best you could with what you were given 30 years ago when this happened to you. Nobody told you, et cetera, et cetera. And so I've spent so much of my time trying to console people who were grieving and regretful. Um, you won't regret bearing the baby.
That's true.
And there are details on the website about, well, how, where, how. Okay, well, there are rules about that, about how far
Hmm.
along you are after a certain gestational age. It's classified as stillbirth, and this is where like city laws or county laws may come into effect about, okay, private graveyard, so you can't bury the baby in your backyard, and I'm not necessarily I'm not recommending that exactly, because you move and you,
No,
you know you,
you can't
you want to
guarantee. Yeah.
no, you can't, and you want to, there are things like there are cemeteries that offer space for babies that's very,
Hmm.
very inexpensive, especially considering how tall, tiny a baby you're talking about.
Hmm.
Also, church cemeteries a lot of times have like parish cemeteries will have space for baby, and it's free. I mean, they have just a special section just for miscarried babies. Monasteries, a lot of
Hmm.
monastery cemeteries have them. I've seen them.
I've seen
And
this too. Yeah.
yeah. And also sometimes, like, our babies were all buried on their parishioners of ours, and they had land out in the country, and they had um, it was, you could almost consider it a family cemetery, but it was, they had one or two family members buried out there, but then there was a previous parishioner years ago had lost a baby, that they had allowed her to bury the baby out there, and so they did the same for us. And so, it, there are different options, but I do recommend that. So, on the you may not have gotten that figure all out by the time the baby's born, but that's why, and I have a whole discussion on what to do beforehand. And there are things like having a container ready, depending on the gestational age. It may need to have saline in it, or maybe not. Again, depends on the
Hmm.
age. So that after the baby's born, you can put the baby in that container and put them at the back of the fridge if you're going to be burying them soon, or in the freezer if it's going to be a while. Sometimes
Hmm.
babies are born in winter and you just can't bury them immediately. That sounds
Oh, right.
awful,
Oh,
but
that's
these
the
are just
reality, though.
practical considerations,
Hmm.
and a lot of people have done that. It's like, look, we had to wait. We weren't going to be visiting the monastery for another 6 weeks. Well,
Hmm.
what are you going to do? Freezer, you know? I mean,
Yeah.
you wrap it up carefully, label it. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. It's not biohazard.
Hmm.
And it's not easy. Nothing's easy. Nothing's easy about miscarriage. So is it hard? Yeah, it's hard,
Hmm.
you know, but the
But
waiting gives you time to arrange this.
but if you do the kind of, I guess, more American medical thing where you never see it, you never talk about it, that's just so. And I'm not at all um, coming down on women that have chosen that, but it's so orthodox to face the death and the reality of death, right? With the open
Yeah,
casket funerals that we have, it's very
yeah.
much, and that's not being morbid. Morbid.
It's not morbid.
It's we're embracing that reality, and that really
Yeah.
does help us to grieve and to process.
Yeah. because it really happened.
It
You
really
don't have
happened.
this sense of unreality. It's like,
Hmm.
no, it really happened. I mean, I personally placed their caskets in the ground. You know, we had a hole dug. We went out there for a little, and we can talk about like services and whatnot. But I'm the one that actually put the casket in the ground. And it was like I took care of them all the way to that point, and then I committed them back to the earth. But I knew that their souls were with God. So, but that was the best I could do to honor them, to honor their living, earthly remains rather. Um, as long as they were in my possession until I had to give it up, and it was hard. It's so hard. But
It's so
when you
beautiful
push,
too.
but it
Such
doesn't
an
go away,
act of love,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
So, okay, I'm on the verge here. I'm gonna.
Sorry.
I read the details of that story of you burying your children, and it got me
Yeah,
pretty hard because I remember some of those same types of things, the
yeah.
smallness of the casket and the dirt, and
It's
it's
too
just
small. Yeah, it feels
way too
very
small.
wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels very, very wrong. But it's,
Mm-mm.
I just a word on. I put this out there eh, because I care. I have seen people who miscarried or who had stillbirths. It's just a distinction of age. It's the same thing. Um, and they dressed up um, the grave with toys, and it looked like a substitute nursery, which is basically how they were treating it. And they changed the decorations every holiday, and they put up a little tiny Christmas tree, and they would do this and they would do that, and they had toys, and one thing we did was before we buried Innocent, who was our first, and then we stuck with this for the rest of them. I said, I'm not creating a nursery out in the country. The babies are not, or at the time, baby is not there. The baby's with God. I'm honoring his body. I'm respecting it. I'm taking care of it. But I'm not going to be coming back out here and talking to the baby here. You know, I would, if I talked to the baby, which I did, because you can't help it. This is what you do when someone has died, is you tend to talk to them, whether it's out loud because you're driving the car or in your icon corner or in your head, saying, "Oh, I miss you so much. I wish you were here. It would have been a year um, today. It's a year anniversary. This is kind of how you do. It's just how you
Hmm.
grieve." But that's I didn't want to get mixed up in my head about where the baby was. Baby's in heaven. The baby's not there. Baby's earthly remains were there, and I took care of them. And we went out every Pascha and sang Christ is risen at the graves, but that was really an acknowledgement that they weren't there, you know. So it's we planted flowers, that kind of thing. That's what you do.
Hmm.
But I really caution people against making like what looks like a substitute nursery, because say I knew that we weren't going to live there forever. As a clergy family, you do move around. And I thought, we're going to wind up leaving sometime to go somewhere. We may never come back. And it's been almost 10 years since we moved. I
Wow.
haven't been back. I very carefully did not set myself up to make it harder when we moved. That was very deliberate. And the way people move around now, just keep that in mind. You will move one day in all likelihood. Maybe you won't, but the likelihood is you'll move. And don't set yourself up to feel like you're leaving your baby all alone when you move across the country, because they're not all alone,
Right.
Uh, anyway, just a practical note. And like I said, it sounds harsh, but it's just because I care. You know, I
Yeah.
don't want people to set themselves up for really awful grief later.
I think there are some temptations
Yeah.
um, around losing a child. I know that my sister, and I don't want to share what they were or anything, but I know there were some serious temptations of asking why and wanting to know, wanting to hear their voice again, things like that. And it really does. You have to be so careful because these are pretty big temptations,
You have to
and it can
guard
lead to,
yourself.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly, protect yourself, and so we're not at all getting down on women that maybe fall into some of these things we were talking earlier. I
Oh,
shared with
and
you the
there's
whole reborn baby doll thing that's going on. That's very upsetting.
yeah,
These are like
yeah,
silicone
it's
dolls that look like very real
they
little
look
babies.
exactly
They look,
like
yeah.
babies. It's
And apparently
scary.
some
Okay.
women are buying these and like
Yeah.
taking care of them every day. And I'm not
Especially
liking them
women
at
who
all.
have especially women who have not had any living children. I think now these dolls can be like 10,000 or more dollars.
Oh my
They're
goodness.
extremely expensive, but they're made by hand. They're hand painted. Every hair is individually inserted. It's an unbelievable process. And some people are doll collectors. I mean, I like dolls. I personally find that if when you can't tell if the baby is real or a doll, I find that a little creepy. But I think that's maybe because I'm Gen X and there were certain films gotta be careful about
Maybe.
those dolls in the middle of the night,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
But,
But it's a
this
sign
is
of not
basically
processing,
it's
right?
you're
Yeah.
delaying grief. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're denying that that's ever happened. And what I've about grief is like the bubble under the linoleum. You know, if you just push it down, it's gonna pop up somewhere else. It doesn't go
Yeah.
away. You just have to deal with it. Putting it off. It doesn't go grief never goes anywhere. So either you deal with it in a good way or you deal with it in a bad way. But you're gonna grieve.
Yeah. So I want to read to you a little quote from your website on grief because I thought it was um I just thought it was so beautiful. Grieving parents don't need people to fix their grief. They need people to allow them to grieve and support them while they do. And I mean, that resonated with me so much. I have a friend who lost a child fairly recently, and, people that are trying to support someone who's, experiencing a loss like this, you want to fix it. I know sometimes husbands and, some of us are fixers. We want to fix it, and there's no fixing it. And just to
You can't
be
fix
with
it.
somebody
Mhm.
is, it's facing the reality of how terrible this is,
It is terrible. Yeah, this
and to
isn't
just be
God
them.
didn't create us for this, you know?
Right.
He didn't create us to die, you know? I mean, this is the aberration. None of us were supposed to die.
Mhm.
Certainly not innocents, you know, certainly not babies. Babies aren't supposed to die. This isn't how it's supposed to be. This is just a fallen world. You know, this is an example of how bad it is. This is an example of why paradise would be so wonderful when none of that happens. There's
Mhm.
nothing like that. This is bad. And uh, we don't have to say that, oh, well, you know, and this is, uh, you know, the temptation for some Christians to say, well, I'm sure God had a reason. Um, Yeah, don't say that. You're
Yeah.
right. He very well may have, but don't say that because that's like, you know, well, we were talking about like, I remember learning in school, you know, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross and the stages of grief and all the rest. You know, I mean, how much you subscribe to that, I mean, there's a lot to be said for it, but you can't just go to step 5, you know, well, I'm just going to push you straight to acceptance. It doesn't work that way, you know you everybody wants to say things like that because grief is really uncomfortable to look at. Nobody wants to, you don't want to grieve, but the second thing you don't want to do is be next to somebody who's grieving. It's really hard because it's hard. It's hard when
Mm.
somebody you love, even just, you know, like as an acquaintance, you know, is hurting and you can't fix it. It's not fixable. There is no fixing it. It just isn't. And uh, it's really hard. The hardest thing you can do, but the most wonderful thing you can do is not run away. And you don't have to say anything profound. They don't need you to say anything profound. In fact, the more profound you try to be, the more likely you are to put your foot in it, And I think one of the people say, "Oh, I don't know what to say." It's like, you know what you say? You say, "I don't know what to say right now." That's true. And they would be like, "Yeah, there's nothing to say. It's true." You know? And I mean, the number of times I've been through it myself, and something people would tell me, and this actually is helpful, is something I'll tell people is it gets better. It's true. It does. It gets better. And what is also true is that sounds like a lie. It sounds like somebody is just lying to your face because there's no way that could ever get better. It's impossible.
How could you
And
smile again? How could you be happy again?
how can
Yeah.
you do this? How can you do that?
Yeah.
And I'll tell you that the reason I know this is true is because when I lost the second baby, 6 months after losing the first, I thought, this will never get better. And I thought, I remember that it got better. I remember that I started to feel better. But even though I remember it, it still sounds like a lie. Even though I experienced it, it sounds like a lie. And that's something that I'll tell people is this will get better, but that sounds like a lie. Sounds like I'm absolutely lying to your face. But I promise you, I know from experience that it will get better. Even after, it's like, people, I would think, how do people survive multiple miscarriages? Well, I, I'm still here somehow. And that's through the grace of God, that you do somehow, but you can't survive. You can't suddenly be like, okay, now I'm 6 years down the road. No, now you're one more minute down the road. Now you're 2 more minutes down the road. There's no hurrying it. But I just, don't run away from people who are grieving, even if it's really hard. And it feels like it's catching. Like if I stick around somebody, maybe it'll happen to me too. I don't want to talk about this grief because what if it happens to me? That sounds superstitious when you say it out loud, but everybody feels that anyway. Like, oh,
Yeah.
we're not going to talk about miscarriage in case it happens. It's like, that's pretty superstitious. But that's kind of how we're allergic to it. Like, oh, we can't talk about anything bad might happen. It's, you know, that's it might actually happen. It's like there's not any cosmic. There is no karma. There's no
Hmm.
fate. There's just a loving God. And either this pregnancy will end in miscarriage at whatever stage, or a living baby, or a baby that then dies from SIDS. 5 weeks later, I have a friend whose baby died from SIDS. I was always terrified of that. I didn't go through it. That just wasn't one of my crosses, as it turns out.
Hmm.
You know, but we all have crosses, and you're like, oh, but none of this ever happened to me. You don't know what's going to happen to you. I mean, God forbid. I know somebody whose 22-year-old was rear-ended at a light, and the car exploded into flames. That was it. They never saw her again. You know, you can't prevent bad things from happening by pretending that they don't happen and by running away from people who are grieving them. They just
Right.
happen sometimes, and it's nobody's fault. I mean, that in that case, that was a drunk driver's fault. But
Sure.
getting back to miscarriage, you didn't
Yeah.
cause the miscarriage. You almost can't. The temptation to guilt. I caused this. I killed the baby. I went through that horribly with the first miscarriage, and then worse after the second, because it was just, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't
Mm.
do anything wrong. Why it happened, I don't know. I'm probably not going to find out in this life, but I've since accepted that it's not important. It's not important for my salvation that I know why, you know, and I try to do something with it. I tried to, well, can I help somebody else go through this? So that's not a
Yeah.
why. That's not, oh, God let this happen to you so that you could make this. No, that's not why it happened. It's just that this happened, the miscarriages happened, and I chose to do a website. You don't have to justify your baby's life by creating a foundation in their honor. There's nothing required. It's not like that. It's not like, oh, well, they would have died in vain if I don't do this. No, there is no, this is just what I did. But we all don't need to make a website. How many foundations do you need? I mean, so
Yeah.
it's okay. That temptation to guilt is a big temptation. Talking about guarding
Mhm.
yourself, that is something that you will be tempted to guilt. It's
Yeah.
guaranteed.
It's
Yeah,
an it's a it's an understandable temptation. Yeah,
it
for sure.
is. It
But you're
is.
not guilty.
But you're
It's
not
not your
guilty. You
fault.
didn't do this. Yeah,
Yeah.
you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the things I found interesting when we were talking and on your website was the distinction between grief and postpartum depression. So could you maybe talk about that a little bit?
Right. Grief you will have. That is normal. Um, and if somebody, by the way, if they look like, oh, they're not grieving, they are. Maybe they're not showing it to you, but they are. So let's not judge people on where we think what we think they should be doing or how they should be.
Hmm.
Oh, they're not grieving appropriately. Yeah. So, as far as postpartum depression, that is obviously everything medical will also have a spiritual aspect, but discussing the medical aspect after you, um, and this actually starts before, if you had a miscarriage, before the baby's born. This is going to start when the baby dies. As soon as your body starts going, hey, something's wrong here, those hormones start dropping. And the reason for everybody's going to go through some postpartum depression. It just may not rise to the level of like, oh, this is a medical diagnosis now, because everybody experiences a crash of hormones after delivery. This is normal. What happens in miscarriage and stillbirth is you also experience a crash in hormones, but now there's not a cute little baby. Also, you're not nursing, which is can be a separate issue depending on how far along you are. You're not nursing, so you're not getting any oxytocin from that, which helps tremendously, by the way, with postpartum depression, is the
Hmm.
oxytocin hits every time the baby nurses. You don't have that option, that you're not getting that. And so you are at higher risk for postpartum depression after miscarriage or stillbirth than you are after a full-term delivery because you you are grieving at the same time and they're going to feed each other. You can't we're integrated people, we're mind,
Yeah.
body, and soul.
Yeah.
And
Can you
so,
just repeat that? Because that I find that shocking that I'm like 47. I've never heard that before. That women that experience miscarriage are more likely, like they're still going to go through the postpartum depression,
yeah,
but it's more likely to be more intense or
it's more likely to be more intense because you're not nursing.
right.
Um, and you don't have, I mean, think about you bring a new baby home. It's very exciting. This is the
Hmm.
baby you've looked forward to. your family comes by. Oh, great grandma finally gets to see her first great grandchild. You've got presents arriving, there are flowers in the house. I don't know, maybe you have a
Yeah.
post baby shower. There's all kinds of wonderful things happening, happy things. Now people can experience severe postpartum depression with all of that there. I mean, I've always had,
Mm.
and if you have a history of depression, just major depression, major depressive disorder, if you have a history of that, you were definitely a higher risk for postpartum depression. This is just how you're wired, unfortunately, sorry to say. And I've experienced that. I've never had it rise to the level of like postpartum psychosis, but I helped take care of a woman who had that and it's scary, scary to watch, and thank the Lord she was hospitalized and got help. I mean, because it was danger zone. She had a living baby, but I'm just saying I've taken care of people who there was nothing wrong with the baby, it was just
Mm.
that's just medically what
Yeah.
happened to her. So what the problem after miscarriage and stillbirth is that people expect you to grieve. But they're not paying it. People think of postpartum depression as something that happens after a full-term delivery, or at
Mm.
least preterm delivery, but there's a living baby. They don't think about that. It's like it's a separate thing. It's like, no, it's the same hormones. It's the same crash. It
That
just
makes
goes
sense
off
now
a
that you
cliff.
explain it.
Yeah, it's the
Yeah.
exact same thing. It's the same crash. It's the same thing, except that there's no baby, and you have all the shock and grief of the baby having
Hmm.
died, and you've had to bury the I mean, the horrible things, maybe you've had to go to the funeral home, maybe you've had, I mean, it's just
Yeah.
maybe you had an autopsy. Again, this is gestational,
Hmm.
there's all these horrible things. And in the meantime, you just delivered a baby. So you're still physically going through, you're still bleeding, you're still maybe having some postpartum cramping. You know, if you were far enough along, your milk might have come in. I mean, we're
Yeah.
talking physical things to deal with. But so you're going to be grieving, but that grief can mask postpartum depression. And that grief, and they'll feed each other. Again, it's hard. There's not like you can draw a line and say that part's grief and this part's post. It doesn't work that way.
Hmm.
It's just like this. And they'll feed off of each other because, again, mind, body, soul. I mean, we're integrated. So it's all going to be there together. But when you have a woman who has miscarried and it's been 3 weeks, I don't know, whatever, 6 weeks, 3 months, and she's not wanting to eat, she's not wanting to get out of bed, that's not grief. That's postpartum depression. I mean, she needs medical help at that point. You know, I think it can be hard to tell. And you don't want to say, oh, instead of grieving, you need to take a pill. It's it's not that simplistic. But when you have grief that has reached the point of toxicity, where you're not taking care of yourself, where you're unable to, and yes, you cannot take care of your family immediately after. I mean,
Hmm.
you need help.
Yeah, for sure.
You
Yeah.
need your family and friends to step in. So we're not talking about that, but we're talking about the fact that after the fact that you physically healed and everything else, and you're lying in bed all day and you're not eating and you're not showering. And it's been 2 weeks since you've taken a shower, washed your hair, and that sounds like,
Mm.
oh, that's awful. Yeah, it's awful. That's not grief. That is postpartum depression. And the person who's experiencing that is not going to pick up the phone and call their doctor because they can't even get out of bed. So
That's right.
that is where
Yeah.
the family member, husband, mother, sister, aunt, best friend, whoever, needs to say, look, I am really, really worried about you. Okay. I understand you're grieving. I'm not trying to take away from your grief, but you're not taking care of yourself. And this has reached the level of being a problem for you. You need care. And say, oh, I don't deserve care. Say there, that right there. That's like, yeah, there we go.
Hmm.
Because that's how they're going to feel. So it's like, no, I'm going to sit here with you on the phone and we're going to call your doctor and I'll drive you over there and I'll sit with you in the room, you
Hmm.
know, don't worry about, oh, my hair, no, we're just going. You can stay in your PJs. I don't care. We're just driving there. And if it's really, really bad, we're driving you to the ER. You know, the person's passing out because they refuse to eat. Okay, we're taking you to the ER. You know, you have to save somebody's life. And that's not just grief. And it's like, it's hard to say, well, this is grief and now it's not. This is one of those
Yeah.
things where you go, come to think of it. And this is where, yes, I'm speaking to the women who are going to experience this, but if this happens to you, you're not going to see it. You will be blind to
Hmm.
this. So I'm speaking to the people around you. They're not going to take care of it themselves. You have to step in and you have to be mean and unpopular and do the mean thing and take them to the doctor. And they say, oh, you don't love me because I don't want to go in. Wow. Okay. Too bad. Sorry you feel that way. We're going. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, we're not doing anything.
And
Yeah.
that's why your website is so important because, as you know, I don't want to get too off topic here, but as our society continues to disintegrate and we went from extended families to nuclear families to a bunch of individuals, this information, what I think we as women just would have known maybe 100 years ago,
Yeah.
we would have
Yeah.
seen our aunts or our neighbors or whatever our
Hmm.
friends go through this, and we would have some knowledge of it, right? But there'd be experienced women all around, and we just don't have that
She would have
anymore.
had grandma stepping in and saying,
Yeah.
so and so is not doing well. She needs to go to the
Hmm.
doctor. I've seen it before. Whereas now this mom on her own with maybe a couple little kids and a husband who's had to
Right.
go back to work.
Right.
Nobody's checking on her. You know.
Yeah, we need more of that. Everyone needs to
Yeah.
be checking in on these ladies for sure.
Yeah. And that's something you can do, in terms of support is everybody wants to check in for the first week, you
Hmm.
know. or whatever, and then it fades out. But, it doesn't. I mean, keep checking, you know, and even after they say they're fine. I have somebody who emails me every year, um, on the Feast of Saint Innocent in March to say, "I was remembering your little innocent today." And
Wow.
it's been 14 years. And she still does that. And I'm not I get to that day and I remember,
Yeah.
I know what day it is. I remember. I don't dwell on it. I'll speak about that in a second because that's important. But I appreciate that she remembers that every year. And you don't have to do that for 14 years. And to be honest, if she didn't, I might not notice, because
Mm.
it's that many years out. I've healed, pretty well. I've kind of come to an acceptance of the situation, but the fact that she does still is really touching. It just
Yeah.
really is. And she's the only one, but that's okay. I'm not slighting anybody else. I was like, oh, I should have done that. No, no, no.
Mm.
I'm just saying that it's really an act of love to do that, to remember, but especially on specific dates, like 1 year
Mm.
on the year anniversary. That's a rough year. On the due date,
Mm.
that's a rough day. Yeah, there are a few key times, and like the next holiday, like Christmas, you know, like, oh,
Right.
they thought they were gonna have a baby this year for Christmas, and now they don't. That
Right.
can be rough. So just kind of checking in, and don't say, "How are you doing?" Because the answer is fine. It's, "Hey, I just wanted to let you know that I was thinking about you. You know, if you want to talk, I'm right here. You can
Mm.
ramble at me or whatever. If you want me to just come over, I'll come and sit and we can watch trash TV or something. I don't watch trash TV, but I would do it.
You
I
do what
would,
you have to
I would
do
sit
for a
there.
friend.
I would do that. Right. So anyway,
Yeah, this February will be 30 years since my nephew died. He would have been 35 this year. And it's difficult because it's only me, my sister, and her husband that remember him. Everyone else that knew him has passed away as well. And so it's a strange bond. I mean, obviously, my sister and I just love each other, but there's also this bond of
shared
loving to
remembrance.
talk about him because
Yes.
he only exists for us. Like, do you remember when he would do this? Or his little
Right.
favorite blinky with the ribbon around the edge. And it's incredibly meaningful.
Mhm.
Actually, there's a priest that remembers him, that buried him. But yeah, that's just, it's a gift you can give to somebody else, I think, to say, I remember.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
lost. I
Right.
remember them.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about maybe what the husband's experience going through all this. How is their experience different? What can we
Yeah.
maybe offer?
It's hard because, of course, all the focus is on the mother.
Hmm.
She's the one who's actually carrying the baby, and any physical things, she's the one that has to go through it. So we do tend to forget the fathers, but that makes it that much harder, for them because in general, men are fixers. They want to go, you have a problem? Here I am. I'm going to fix it. I'm going in guns blazing. We're going to get this taken care of. I remember my dad was a fixer, and I tended to be a fixer too. And so that actually was a bit of comfort to me when he would go in and just, okay, we're going to make a plan. We're going to fix this. Not miscarriage, but like when I was growing up.
Hmm.
And well, men in general are fixers, but you can't fix miscarriage. You can't make it all better. There's nothing you can do. And so they wind up feeling very, very helpless and kind of going, and so they want to do whatever they can do. And sometimes that's like, okay, what can I do? Well, this is how you get, like, I'm miscarrying and my husband is out weed eating everything, which sounds dumb. It's like, what I
But
really
I get
need
it.
is somebody to help me with this, but they're not doing that. But they couldn't fix anything, so they did something. They
Mm.
needed
Yeah.
something physical to do. Get this, they're fixers. And so I think, and how your husband reacts is going to be different based because how everybody's different. But I think the most important thing, because I don't remember what the statistics are, but statistically, a lot of marriages break up after the loss of a child. And I don't know if that's been subdivided into, um, a previously living child or a miscarriage. I don't know if that's been divided up, but I know that that too can have its
Hmm.
problems. Um, is to remember that for a husband and wife, you're on the same team. You're not fighting against, you're not adversaries, you're not on opposing teams, you're on the same team. And the second thing to remember is they don't read minds well. Most men are really poor mind readers, just how it is.
Yeah.
And so you have to say it, you have to tell them. I remember um, one awful night after, and I think this was after my first miscarriage. I was up. I think I had been sick too, so I was just like, just everything bad. And I was up and I was just crying. And it was the middle of the night. The middle of the night was terrible because there are no distractions. What can you do in the middle of the night? You can't clean your house. You're just left in the dark with your thoughts. Terrible. And I would pray, but I would cry and I would cry and cry and cry. And my husband was like, God bless him. I know he was tired. And he's like, what do you want me to do? What do you want? And I said, I want my baby back.
Yeah.
And it was just left hanging in the air because he couldn't give me the baby back. He would have, if he could, he would have moved heaven and earth. He couldn't. They can't. But he listened to me say it and didn't say anything back other than, I love you. I'm sorry I'm here. You know, so just don't stop communicating. They can't read your mind. Um, they don't know what to do. They just want to fix it. Usually, this involves you start getting into nitty-gritty medical stuff that most men, unless they're doctors or nurses or EMTs or something, don't have any idea about, have never given one single thought about. They don't know anything. I mean, they don't know much about the physical process of pregnancy and birth. They're the ones standing there, like, shell shock in the delivery room. And suddenly here they are, and their wife's going through hell. And let's remember that they lost a baby too. It's their baby too. But they feel weird about it because they never felt the baby move. They never saw the baby. They didn't go through any hormone changes. And so the baby's
Hmm.
kind of an abstract idea, which is also why it's helpful to deliver the baby so you can see it,
Yeah.
because then they can hold the baby. And I remember that my husband never cried when we lost the second one until after I delivered the baby, and I held him, and the nurses and the doctor left us alone. Just as soon as reason they did some real quick tidying up and then just scurried out because they knew we just wanted to process. And when he actually held him in a little blanket, because I brought a little blanket and gown and everything. When he actually held him, that's the first time he cried. The baby wasn't, I mean, I don't mean to say it like this because it wasn't that he didn't think there was a real baby, but the baby wasn't real for him until he was actually,
Hmm.
holding the baby in his hands. Then it's real. That's when he's
Yeah.
processing, I've lost my son, you know, and that can be what it takes, which is another argument for deliver the baby, because it's not just for you, it's for your family too. My children got to see their siblings, which helped them see that this was real, and they're all very staunchly pro-life, by the way, because they
Mm.
know it's a baby. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, so it's hard for them, and they're also going to grieve differently. Men and women grieve differently. You're not doing it right, and they're doing it wrong. You know, if you just keep in mind you're on the same team, and men are fixers, and this is something they can't fix, which makes them feel very upset because they're helpless.
Mm.
And boy, if there's something they can do, like, can they dig a grave? Can they build a casket? I mean, sometimes people are physically,
Yeah.
capable in that way. If you have something to do, if there's any kind of tragedy, emergency, or anything, and somebody's like this, give them something to do. That's why
Mm.
they always had the husbands go boil water. They boiled buckets and buckets of water. You didn't need all that water for a delivery, but it gave them something to do. I'm really not kidding. That's why they boiled all that water. It got them out of the room and gave them something to do because they're panicking, you
Mhm.
know? So boil water, I mean, I'm being silly about the water, um, but you know, having them manage tasks is great because it's helpful for them. It gives them something to do because men want something to do. And so,
Yeah.
and
And
so I
this
would say, anyway, I was just going to say, if you're a friend, if you're outside, if you're not the husband or wife, if you're outside of that, check in on the husband too, but expect him to say he's fine. Expect him to say, no, no, don't worry about me. Check on her, you know, but check on
yeah.
him too. Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking about the, like, needing something to do, and when you maybe approach a woman, maybe they're reluctant to ask for help, but just knowing that this dynamic is at play could be helpful to say, um, "I'd like to come help. What can I do?" To give me something to do because
Give me something to do.
yeah, and for the woman to accept that is part of their grieving, and maybe it's not something in the house so you can have privacy. Like I think on your blog it talked about maybe take the
Right.
kids out or
Yeah. Take the
make
kids
them
to
a
the
dinner.
playground. They're still, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to the store. Do you need toilet paper? You know,
Hmm.
I mean, whatever. There's, yeah. It, and also, don't do that. Call me if there's anything I can do. If they're never going to call you, they're never going to.
Hmm.
I mean, if they're really good friends, they might, but most of the time, just say, hey, I'm going to the store. I'm going to be driving past your house. Can I pick up a few things for you? And I'll just leave them on your doorstep. As in,
Hmm.
you don't have to clean up. You don't have to
Right.
invite me in,
Right.
be really low demand,
Hmm.
say, hey, I've made an extra casserole. Can I bring one by? I'll just leave it on your doorstep. I don't have to come in. If you want me to
Hmm.
come in, I'll come in, but don't feel like it, don't feel up to it. Or, hey, you want me to come over? It's like, or if you're really good friends, just say, hey, I'm coming over. Um, I'll do your laundry. I mean, if you're that level of friend,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't have that level of friend, but some people do. So,
Well, you
uh,
do, but I can't do your laundry from over here,
yeah,
Matushka.
I know, but you not from all the way over there. So yeah, you know what I'm saying.
I know.
So well, anyway, yeah, and don't be afraid to say the wrong thing, and so you don't say anything. Like you don't call because you don't want to say the wrong thing. Better to call and say, "Hey, I'm just really sorry, and I don't know what to say, and I wish I could fix it for you. I wish I could make it all better. I know I can't,
Hmm.
but I wish I could." That means a lot. It's not eloquent,
Does.
but nobody cares about eloquent, you know?
Yeah.
Uh,
I
just
was really I was really touched when my nephew died. I was only I think I was 18. Yeah, I was 18 when he died. So still very young myself. Thank God I had gone back to Florida and seen him just 2 months earlier for Christmas. And so um but I was really touched by how many people reached out and like people I didn't really know that well or even at all and gave me a little note or opened up about their own loss and it wasn't just in that first few days because I had to fly back to Florida, and take care of be there for the burial and everything. But in the coming weeks, it's like people didn't forget. They kept dropping little notes and checking in, and I still remember all of it. It's been 30 years, and I remember all those people and what they gave
yeah.
me. Some of the stuff I still have.
Yeah. Yeah, I save things in a memory box, and that actually memory box that so if you especially if you miscarry really early, if you don't have a body, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and that can happen, and if you miscarry at 5 weeks, the likelihood of finding anything is really, really slim. Don't
Yeah.
beat yourself up. This is just God has provided that this is the case. He's not gonna, why didn't you have a bear? It's not like that. God's not looking
Right.
to, beat you down with a hammer. Um, but it can be really hard not to have anything tangible at all. And
Mm-hmm.
so saving those notes from people, an ultrasound picture, um, I know this sounds funny, but I mean, I cut a lock of my own hair. I actually went and I finally, there's cultures in which they'll shave their heads for grief. I think
Mm-hmm.
I think actually Buddhists do that, but I did not shave my head. Um, but I kind of understood the impulse because I actually just went and chopped my hair off. I mean, which I will do occasionally. I haven't done it in a very long time, but once upon a time I would do that occasionally. But I just went and chopped my hair off, and then it occurred to me to save a lock of my hair because I was never gonna have a lock of the baby's hair. And so I actually have a lock of my hair in the memory box when it was a lot darker now. But uh but there's a list of ideas, if you want, if you're like, well, what can I put in there? I don't have
Mm.
a footprint. I don't have
Yeah.
a hat, I don't have a this, I don't that, because if you miscarry early, there's just not a lot of, so what do anyway, there's a list of things, but it can be helpful. And that's a place that, you could, it was like a little wooden box from Hobby Lobby. I decorated it.
Mm.
Um, that can be a place where you can save those notes. People, sent me, and like the little cards that may come with any flowers. Um, and sending flowers, by the way, is really nice, and that's a pretty typical thing to do in this
Yeah.
country. Give it some thought because flowers die
Mm.
and look really bad, and then you have a house full of death, and that sounds so
Mhm.
ungrateful. I don't mean it to be, but it's tricky. I'm just saying that,
Yeah.
you
I can
know,
understand
um,
that.
you wouldn't think, you say, oh, that's so ungrateful. People say, I was very grateful for anybody who sent flowers at any point for any of my
Hmm.
losses. I really was. I'm just like, I would look up because you go into a fog because
Yeah.
the days kind of run together, and you're just trying to get through. And then one day you look up and you realize, or they sent a plant and you realize you didn't water it and
Mm.
it's dead. And you're like, that's dead too. And that sounds
Yeah, but you're
grim.
so not sensitive, but raw at that point that any little
Yeah,
thing
it,
can
it,
be
it is.
difficult.
It
Yeah.
is. And so that's tricky. What was nice was after our second one, I delivered him. In fact, it was this day 14 years ago, when I delivered
Wow.
him. And I'm again, I was 14 years ago. I'm doing fine.
Yeah.
It does get better, I promise. I just remember, and I can remember the edges are all softened, in the memories now. It's not like
Hmm.
sharp like a
Yeah.
knife the way it was. But one thing that is, they sent some poinsettias. They kept our older kids, the friends of ours from out of
Hmm.
state. They actually kept our older kids for a few days because I went in the hospital. And so when we met up and they gave us the kids back, they also sent a couple poinsettias. And what we did is we took them out to the grave and we had them sitting there while we did the memorial service. But if we left them there, they would have just died. So what
Hmm.
we did is we took them to church. And so we were able to
Wow.
offer them to church. And then it kind of became the parish's problem in a sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
not my problem to keep them alive. I abdicated that, and that was nice. I will just say that if you give a plant, it's wonderful to here you are, and then like it's the churches now or something. I mean, I don't know, that's not always a practical thing, but just remembering that that was really nice that I didn't have to keep something else alive. When I could barely remember
Yeah.
to feed myself.
Hmm.
So yeah, I
It
don't
gives
know.
the
It,
people in the
it's
parish an opportunity to do something for you too, really, by leaving the flowers there. Like that's
Yeah,
because again,
yeah,
people want
doing
to
it.
do something. They want to
People want to do
show love
something,
in
and it's
some way.
nice to send flower to bring flowers to the church.
Hmm.
To decorate. Like I'm putting flowers in front of the icon of the Theotokos. That's
Yeah.
that's really nice. And
Hmm.
then it's not your responsibility for the upkeep. And I don't know. It's just an idea. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah. Can we talk lastly about the services that are or the prayers or the spiritual component of all this? I think we've maybe
right.
touched on it a little bit, but
We've touched. One thing, after it's traditional in the Orthodox Church, after you have a baby, that are you have a blessing to stay home for 40
Mhm.
days, give or take after, and then you come back to church, and there's a special prayers called the churching prayers. We're welcoming you back to church. And it's not a punishment. It's not saying, oh, you can't come to church. It's just, it gives you a blessing to stay home and heal. And, if you miscarry now, if it were very early, then it's not the same amount of physical healing as it is after a full-term birth,
Hmm.
but there's still, I mean, you still had a baby, you still went
Yeah.
through the hormone crash, you still had a baby, you're still bleeding, all the rest. Take the time that the church offers to heal. You may not be ready to go back and face people anyway.
Yeah.
This isn't a punishment. This isn't a banishment. It's a blessing. It's a blessing that's, that we're given 40 days to stay home and heal and rest and recover and then come back to church. And we're welcome back to church with special prayers. And there are churching prayers when you have lost a baby that don't include prayers for the baby. There are special, and the the ones that have been used for a very long time, um, also, uh, they it's difficult. And this is the first this for the first baby or two. These are the prayers that were read for me because this is the prayers that were there. But the churching prayers um, ask God to absolve you of any guilt for losing the baby. Which, when you're feeling guilty, like you caused the death of the baby, that's kind of not what you want to hear. Got to be honest,
Mm.
I'm not trying to question the church's wisdom on this, because it's been explained to me that, well, everybody's going to feel that guilt. This is absolving you of that. I'm like, to me, it just kind of confirmed that I should be guilty. That's kind of how I read it. That's not
Yeah.
saying that was the right way to read it. That's just how it felt. But since then, they have, and this is, I think this came from the Senate. I mean, I don't know. I just simply can't remember now what the source of this is, but it's official and authorized. It's not just off of somebody's website. They have another, I hate to say updated, but it's a new, slightly modified churching prayer that doesn't reference it does not imply that the mother's guilty for having killed her baby, you know, which the other one kind of sort of did, you know. And so I think that was just seen as being, maybe we're keeping the church in prayers, but let's be clear that we're not blaming the mom for this. Let's just make it absolutely clear beyond a shadow of a doubt that we're not saying this is your fault. Like,
Yeah.
we went above and beyond to do that, basically. And so, if you've only ever heard the first one, you may you may be a little reluctant to actually have the priest read this. There's another one. There's another one, and I don't know if, like, every priest is going to have it in their great book of needs or anything like that. But you
And
can
this is
always
for the
talk to the priest
OCA.
ahead of time. I'm sorry.
Was this the OCA that put these out, or Antiochian?
That's what I'm saying. I cannot remember
Oh, okay.
exactly which body, but it's an official. It's not like on a parish level. This
Okay.
was either from the Synod, Holy Synod of Bishops, or I just cannot remember
Okay. But it's
exactly.
on
It
your
may be
website.
OCA. Yeah, yeah, it is. And
Okay.
I'm drawing a blank. I mean, to be honest, it could have been the Antiochians that put it out or something
Mm.
like that. They're pretty good for
Okay.
that too. Um, I don't believe it was the Greek church. I don't think I am fairly sure it wasn't Rocor, but in any event,
Mhm.
this is not like off of somebody's blog. This was, from the bishops. Excuse me. So you could talk with your priest ahead of time about which prayer, and
Mhm.
anyway, have that discussion. If you're
Yeah.
like, oh, I really don't, I can't stand there in the back of the church in the narthex and hear that read. It would destroy me. You know, just talk to your priest. I mean, don't
Yeah.
suffer. Go talk to your priest.
Hmm.
This isn't rocket science. Um, so in any event, you may decide, and you can talk to your priest, and it may be that you mutually decide that, you know what, I can come back after 3 weeks. I'm physically healed. I'm doing better. I really feel the need to come back to church. That's fine. Nothing says you can't come back. I mean, that's between you and your priest. So, but in any event, when you come back, there are prayers that welcome you back. Um, once you've physically healed and you're no longer bleeding,
Mhm.
and again, this is between you and your spiritual father, you can go back to communion and things like that. And the sacraments of the church are for our healing. So
Yeah.
the sooner within that time frame, don't. don't prolong the time when you come back to sacramentally participate in the life of the church, because this is for your healing. This will
Hmm.
help. Um, and come back to your church family too, because people do want to help and they just may not know what to do or say, and maybe they don't feel comfortable like calling you or going by your house. But there's a little you who you only know by sight, who stops you and says, hey, I just want to let you know I was praying for you during this time. I lost 3 babies myself. It was 70 years ago, and I'll never forget them. This will get better, I promise.
Yeah.
And this, you'll cry, of course, she'll probably cry, but you'll feel better. So,
Yeah.
when you go back to church, this will be good. Um, Before then, you're going to have to think about, burial. And up until um, several years ago, really the only recommendation was that you could do the Trisagion prayers at the graveside. That was really the only sanctioned service, um, because this is an unbaptized baby
Mm.
through no fault of your own,
Right.
but it's unbaptized. And so this is what the church does for unbaptized babies of whatever age,
Hmm.
whether this was miscarriage or whether it was 5 weeks after birth and they hadn't got, it was SIDS, it was an accident, it was whatever, they hadn't been baptized yet. Um, they had the same thing. It's just the Trisagion prayers. Since then, um, and I was involved with a small group of people, including a few bishops, several years ago, um, where we were coming up with a couple things. One was a burial service. Like, we need to do better. We have, there's a gap. If we're really pro-life, then we need to actually
Hmm.
act pro-life, and we need to actually, like, not treat these babies like an afterthought. That's ridiculous. We
Yeah.
need to walk the walk.
That's a good
And
point.
um, so we were working on coming up with, and this was the OCA, we were working on coming up with a burial service. And the second thing was like a guidebook for priests, because most priests haven't, well, I mean, actually, I don't know what the percentage would be, but a lot of priests have never, their wives haven't miscarried. And so they have no personal experience. They never mentioned it in the seminary. They come out and the woman miscarries and says, Father, what do I do? And he's like, no
Yeah.
idea, no clue. And so we came up with a booklet for priests that was just for the priests. It was like, okay, look, so here, this is what a miscarriage is. This is what a stillbirth is. These are options, like, this is what the woman is likely to encounter when it comes to management, just so you have some idea what she's talking about. And also, um, here are some, like, if we're going to bury the baby, how do you do that? What are the rules? Look up the rules in your state, because they can be different. And also, here's a service, and here are some list of resources for her. And so we came up with a booklet for priests. And that was, I can't remember what year that was, but it's been a few years. So
Well,
that
that's a
was in
really
20,
great thing to do, though, because you're right.
it is,
It's these things weren't really talked about, I think, when we were young, and I think
no,
people are more willing to talk about women's health
yeah,
in general. Um, and yeah, we need to respond. The church has a place in this
yeah, it does.
to
And
help.
we just kind of needed to not just be quiet about it, because
Hmm.
once upon a time, women simply didn't say anything. So the
Yeah.
priests had never had to deal with it because women never told them. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
and it wasn't until you had priests whose wives were dealing with it, and they were like, "Well, nobody told me anything in seminary about what to do about this. It's ridiculous."
Hmm.
So, anyway, so there are services now, and there are multiple, because you know how it is. We've got one for every jurisdiction. Um, so talk to your priest, about okay, our bishop has said we use this. Okay, great. Whatever it is, there are different ones. There's some on the listed on the website, and there are links, but they're going to be pretty similar. It's basically very similar to the burial of a child, with just a few modifications. Like, you're not asking for forgiveness of any sins. mean, they were never even born, you know?
Yeah.
So there's it's just some modifications. Like I think there are a lot of the petitions that are left out that just simply don't apply to a baby. Um, but there are actually services now. You don't have to just do the Trisagion prayers and go, okay, guess we're done here, which is
Yeah.
kind of unsatisfactory. Yeah.
Mm.
So things have changed for the better, in the last 14 years, since I kind of burst upon the scene and said, wait, we need to do better. So, um, yeah, things are better, which is good. So yes. So anyway, it's the church. You would have already dealt with the burial, the service. Some and this is kind of depends on your jurisdiction, depends on your priest. I know women who have had services in the church, like they actually had the casket on a little tiny table in the church.
Okay.
This depends on your bishop.
Yeah.
I can't tell you,
Yeah.
that's how you should do it. This depends on your bishop. Just talk to your priest. But there should not be an answer of, oh, there's nothing we can do. That's not an answer,
Hmm.
and priests may not know what to do, but they're like, say, okay, I don't know, but let me call our dean. I actually haven't. Maybe it's a tiny new mission, and they've just never had, or came out of seminary last year, and they're like,
Okay.
that's okay. Say they may just say, hey, let me get back to you. But the answer is never going to be, oh well, there's nothing we can do. You know, so
Absolutely.
because that's not what we believe.
Right.
That's not in line with what we believe about human life and dignity and um, yeah.
Right.
So
Okay. Well, thank you, Matushka, for sharing this very personal subject, and I appreciate
you're
your
welcome.
transparency and your, just the way you handle the subject is really beautiful. And what you see in this interview with Matushka is definitely what you get on the website. A lot of practical advice, but also a lot of understanding and compassion. And the website's again really for everyone, women who are experiencing this, the husbands, the friends and family, the clergy. Like it's truly for everybody. So it's one of those things you want to know about before it happens, I think.
Ideally,
Ideally. Yeah.
there are a lot of people who've said, "Hey, I came across your website, and then last year, and then I just found out last week that I was miscarrying." You
Yeah.
know, so and then there are priests who have told me that they just send they're the women who come to them, they send them straight to the website. So I'm glad to know that it's, gotten some unofficial sanctioning. So
Good. Good.
anyway,
Well, thank God.
yeah,
Okay. Thank
thank
you so
God
much for
indeed.
being here, Matishka.
Thank you so much. Thank
We're
you.
recording during Advent. It's on the Feast of St. Innocent, I guess. I didn't realize that. Right?
Oh no, this is uh the Holy Innocents are on is it
No, I
29th?
meant, I thought it was St. Innocent for your son.
Um, that's March 31st, and then October 6th. And it
Okay.
was Andrew. Yeah, it was
Oh,
Andrew.
Andrew.
Yeah, it was Andrew died on the Feast of St. Andrew. That's we named him Andrew. It was the
Okay.
Feast of St. Andrew on November 30th. And then I delivered on the 10th. Yeah.
Okay. Today. Oh, the
So,
delivery was today. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So
So,
I thought maybe we should drop this conversation on the Holy Innocents after Christmas. Maybe we'll do that in their honor and in honor of all the children lost and loved, and eternally remembered. So
yes.
thank you, Matushka.
Thank you very much.